So a couple months ago in one of our videos, Bree and I kind of shared a little bit about what was going on in our lives, and that unfortunately Bree's dad Ed was going through some unfortunate times and was dealing with cancer. And so, we've gone through a lot since that time, and ultimately he is doing really well and has recovered really well, but this is his story. This past winter, before we found out about his diagnosis, our plan for the summer was to get him ready and hike up to Maggie's Peak and have him experience that view for the first time. But our plans were spoiled with this unfortunate news, but he has worked his way back, and that was his goal after surgery, to work back to hike up and see the view from Maggie's Peak. All right, Ed, so you seem really motivated to do this hike. What's the driving force behind this?
I've always enjoyed my time hiking and climbing in the mountains. This goes back to back when I was in my 20s. I worked for the U.S. Forest Service as a backcountry ranger for a couple of years in the Bighorn Mountains. And it even goes to more recently. I spent about 11 years working for the Glacier National Park as a backcountry ranger, dealing with permits out of many glacier and glacier parks. So I've always really enjoyed the outdoors, but in particular I've really taken advantage of my climbs and hikes as a way to help motivate rehab from different situations. I've had 2 knee replacements, an Achilles repair, a back surgery, and each time I'd be kind of laid up for a long time and would look at a hike or a climb as a motivation to help me try to get my act together and get more help my rehab. And now I'm trying to use this opportunity to rehab from my experience with esophageal cancer. So hopefully I climb up Maggie's Peak later this fall.
So Ed, tell us more about the cancer journey that you've had.
Well, I'm sure it started years and years ago, but I really didn't have any symptoms until a little less than a year ago. I was in Chicago visiting family for Thanksgiving, and suddenly out of nowhere I had a real black tarry stool for a couple of days. But as it was, I did go to a doctor about a month later and told them about it, and they decided to do a blood test, and the blood test came up that I was very anemic. And so that necessitated that I follow that up with a colonoscopy and endoscopy. But because I wasn't really a high-risk patient, that could have taken a couple months to get done. And I kind of was saved by the Super Bowl, because nobody wants to, in the right mind, wants to do a colonoscopy prep on Super Bowl Sunday. So I was able to get in that Monday for the colonoscopy, endoscopy, and figured I'd wake up, and he talked to me about taking care of my bleeding ulcer. Well, I did wake up, and the doctor told me I had a relatively large mass in the bottom of my esophagus that appeared to be cancerous. And so 2 days later, we closed on our purchase of a house, and the same day we discovered that a confirmation that I have esophageal cancer.
Ed, so it's been quite a long time since Super Bowl Sunday, so tell us a little bit more about what happened since that time.
Okay, well, I'll start off with the biopsy. The biopsy showed that I had basically had this process going on for many, many years. It generally starts, the biopsy shows Barrett's esophageal tissue, and Barrett's esophagus usually is caused by severe acid reflux for years that goes untreated. And in my case, it was silent acid reflux because I never had any burning, never woke up at night, never knew I had acid reflux. And so the Barrett's esophagus went untreated for years, and eventually that led to some more dysplasia, which is a precancerous tissue. And then eventually that all led to what they call carcinoma, and carcinoma was a cancerous tissue. So that's kind of what the biopsy tells you, and then we kind of have to go from there.
Well, we've run out of time. We have some other commitments, but we made it up 1,000 feet. We got still some beautiful views over Lake Tahoe. Time to start heading down. So Ed, I'm guessing you were pretty surprised when you woke up from your test and found out your results?
Oh God, I was shocked, absolutely blown away. That's all you could say, but I amazed myself as I've always lived by the adage that it is what it is, and then we go from there. And I just switched into that mindset pretty quickly. It was really easy to kind of go into woe is me kind of stuff, but life is that the highs in life are defined by the lows, and without the lows you really don't understand and appreciate the highs. And so I just really tried to focus on what was ahead. I tried not to get into if only, because I started to, if only I had didn't have such issues with my poor relationship with food, for example. If only I had gone in earlier, but that doesn't really help any. And so it didn't take long before I really switched into the mindset, a positive mindset of what can I do going ahead. And this might sound kind of weird after all this has gone by, but I'm not angry at all that I had this situation. I actually am appreciative. I've learned so much, I've grown so much, and I got so many blessings that have occurred along the way that I'm not upset that I've had this cancer journey. It's actually been, it is what it is, but I really appreciated what it's taught me.
The totals were, we went up 1,150 feet, and I think we went 4.5 miles today. So Bree, after your dad got his test result, we went through a lot of different things, but he kind of made the decision to go to Mayo back in Minnesota to get treatment based on their expertise. Can you tell us a little bit more about kind of the process after he got the biopsy result and went to Mayo?
Yeah, so for this type of cancer, it's relatively rare and it's pretty serious as far as it's got not the best mortality rates or survival rates. So when he, learned about it and learned what it was, he, then started that search of, well, where do I go and where do I get treatment? Being from Minnesota, we're very familiar with Mayo in Rochester. So he looked at Mayo, and even though it's a relatively rare cancer, Mayo seems like they treat quite a few cases within the states. And so with it, when you are facing something like this, you want to go somewhere that has experience treating it. So he was able to basically self-refer, which was great. However, it did take, I think, like a month and a half to 2 months for him to actually get in to see people and have consults. And once he did get in, basically they set aside like 2 weeks of where he had, consults with a cardiothoracic surgeon, with an oncologist, and then also with a oncologist radiologist. They put a ton of appointments, 16, 17 appointments over the course of 2 weeks, where he was able to meet with a team that was going to be helping battle this cancer. While he did that, then they kind of decided the plan of care going forward, and he found that he was able to have surgery, which is a good thing considering that that's really the only way to cure this or beat it long term. And then with discussing between the oncologist and the radiologist, basically they had a clinical trial that had, I don't know, they seemed really confident in it, and so with it, Dad wanted to help further science, and so with it, he decided to do the clinical trial. But once he had decided this path, he came back to California for a little bit and then went back to Minnesota for about 3 months that we didn't really see him. During that clinical trial, it involved both chemo and radiation. The radiation at Mayo actually is pretty remarkable that it's a proton radiation, which is good when you're treating really sensitive areas that are around like the heart and lungs, so it's a lot more specific and accurate. So he was able to do that, and then he also went through chemo treatments where you'd have continuous chemo basically for 48 hours, and he went through 3 different rounds of that. It seemed like, at first it didn't impact him too much, but as it's kind of a cumulative effect, as you've had more chemo and more radiation, then you definitely start to have the impacts of fatigue and just not feeling very well. I think he kept joking about like, where's the truck that hit me? I didn't get the license plates. But he did that, and then he came back, and then it was kind of waiting for everything to settle, and then also making sure the cancer hadn't spread before the next big step, which is an esophagectomy surgery. Same time for that big day of that surgery coming up. So thankfully his scans before surgery showed that the cancer had not spread. And both myself and Dan were there, my sister Robin and my mom, and we were kind of his crew supporting him along the way. And he had a pretty crazy surgery. They call it an Ivor Lewis surgery, and they say it's one of the hardest surgeries to recover from and go through. He was under anesthesia for about 10 hours, so it was a very anxious 10 hours for his loved ones finding out what happened or how he fared with it. But we had a lot of confidence in his medical team. Basically what they do is they first do like an abdominal incision from here all the way down by about 12 inches. And at that point, they basically take that stomach and they cut a lot of the vessels, like arteries and nerves around that keep that stomach there so that it will be more free and more movable. And then they also put in a feeding tube into his small intestine at that time. And then they sew him up, and then they turn him on his side, and then they basically took a huge incision along one of his ribs on the right side, basically used something to cut and split that rib in half, and then deflated his lung, and then took out basically the tumor and the esophagus that had been impacted by the cancer, took all of that away and some of the healthy tissue to have margins as well, including like the top part of the stomach, and then pulled that stomach all the way up into about right here. And that basically is how long his stomach got stretched to form basically a new conduit, so like a new esophagus. And then basically reinflate the lung, sew him up, and then expect him to basically walk the next day. If it would have been earlier in the day, or he would have finished earlier, they said sometimes they even get people walking that same day, which is crazy. All right, so after the surgery was done, my dad had 10 days on basically the thoracic surgery ward. And his nursing team and medical team were amazing. They all kind of called him the rock star because he just had such an upbeat attitude, and he loved learning about each of them. And he played his favorite music, which is Fat Freddy's Drop, a New Zealand band, and he would wear his robe like a cape, and he would walk around that ward doing like way more than what they expected him to do, just because he has his goal of getting better and moving onwards. And he would play Fat Freddy's Drop while he was walking around the ward. So yeah, he kind of got the nickname Rockstar, but he just showed a really, really great positive attitude, even though that was a really, really rough 10 days.
So we will share with you guys a few of the clips from Ed in the hospital. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of the other clips of Ed once he was back here in California, slowly building up his hiking to, flat neighborhood trails, to adding, 200 or 300 vertical feet every 1 to 2 weeks, hiking in and around the Tahoe area. So he has worked his way up to hiking about 12 to 1300 feet and has done a longest hike, I think, of about 11 miles. So the reason I wanted to get this video out today is today's the day. It's Sunday, October 13th, and it's early in the morning. We are leaving in an hour or so, and so we'll put out our journey up to Maggie's a different day, but Yeah, really, really proud of you, Ed. You've worked really, really hard to get where you're at today. So, should be a great day.
Don't dance.
If I don't see it.
All right, what day post-op is it? Day 5?
Well, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, 3, Saturdays, 4, Sundays, 5, Mondays, 6, for 6 days.
Dad, you're being discharged. All right, Dad's at the center working out to his favorite band. Fat Freddy's Drop.